Let's talk about the psychology behind perfectionism and its impact on organizations, especially in AI transformations. Perfectionism seems noble, a commitment to excellence and high standards. There's nothing wrong with that. Yet there's a crucial difference between pursuing excellence and falling into the perfectionism trap. In Agile and AI context, perfectionism can undermine core principles that drive real value delivery as quickly as possible, continuous improvement, and adaptability. It creates a mindset where nothing ever feels ready to ship. Feedback arrives too late, and teams lose touch with real world impact of their work. Let's explore the psychological drivers of perfectionism, how it shows up in organizations, and practical strategies to find that good spot that's that good enough, that maximizes value without sacrificing quality. So let's dive in. First, what is this psychology, perfectionism? How do these things fit in? There's a cognitive bias that within us, we're always seeking this perfect state. And that's an ideal. It's a good ideal to have. It's a good standard. It's good to have something to look up to, something to aspire to. But the problem comes when we make that the only good answer, the right answer. It's when it's perfect. That is what creates the problem. So it creates an all or nothing belief. If it's not flawless, it's worthless. There's nothing in between. It creates a very black and white view of the world. The world is gray, and there are different shades of gray. And the grades are oftentimes good enough. So this pursuit of always making it perfect, that's what creates the problem. It's not trying to get there, it's only accepting when we have it perfect. So it creates a real sense of intolerance. It's this intolerance to the uncertainty, which drives endless checking. We're continuously, it becomes a neurotic, continuous checking. There's a neurobiological wiring that it becomes overactive to error detect. It's always checking, 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 checking. Again, there's nothing wrong with being detail oriented and wanting to make sure that things are done well. And there are professions that you better get things right and do things in the best way possible. If you're a doctor, no, it's not good enough to just check and make sure everything's okay before you close up the patient. You have to make sure that nothing has stayed behind that shouldn't be there. So there are professions that require high levels of perfection. And then there's the rest of reality, which really has a whole load of good enoughs that meet the needs and allow us to make progress without having to reach that level of perfection. There's simply no time, and there's a lot of opportunity loss if we're always pursuing that perfect state. So there's a difference between healthy and unhealthy perfectionism. Where it's healthy, it's growth oriented standards and adaptive feedback that are continuously pushing us forward. Or, as I mentioned, there may be perfections that absolutely demand high levels of perfection. Beyond that, it's just about always keeping that high aspiration to always do better, to always deliver higher quality, to always give the best services and products possible to our customers. When it becomes unhealthy is when it becomes fear-driven goals that trigger procrastination because there's always a reason not to finish because we're always continuously trying to make it better. There's a good reason to delay this. We're just trying to make it better. As a result of that, things don't leave. Things we don't release things. We're held back. So there's also an impact to people who are engaged in this approach in the psychology. There's a lot of anxiety, burnout that results from it, and the teams and individuals ultimately become disengaged because under the constant pressure, it really is not fun to work that way. So there are cultural factors that reinforce this perfectionist behaviors, like rewarding zero defect outcomes more than learning. When all that we are asking is who shipped the most polished feature, no, the most perfect one, it creates this competition dynamics, always comparing, as opposed to looking at each one of our releases and understanding that each one of them was a learning opportunity and we learned from it. And many times we learn from the things that didn't go perfect. And that's what allows us to iterate and make it perfect, better along the way. So leadership signals emphasize this flawless approach, this flawless perspective, this very black and white approach to the work that we're doing. There are also organizational structures that promote perfectionism, like rigid approval gates and long sign off chains, that you know that in order to get through them, you're going to have to go through many hurdles. Who wants to go through that? You want to make sure that you get it right. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely painful and extremely lengthy to go through it. That creates a lot of pressure from business to make sure that everything is perfect before we go through one of those exercises. That's a structural issue that is reinforcing the perfectionist perspective. We may have heavy documentation requirements before we do any demos. It has to be perfect. We cannot show something to customers that isn't perfect because we're going to look bad. It's going to make us look like we're not professional. If you frame it correctly, if you set expectations correctly with customers, customers are very understanding. And in fact, they can be very excited to see things, even if it's not perfect, because it gives them an idea of how things are progressing, as opposed to having to wait until, yes, they're going to expect that it's going to be perfect because they've waited too long. So there's a real opportunity to get good feedback while things are not perfect. When we have a lack of incremental delivery paths where we're not rewarding the small wins, that creates a lot of unnecessary pressure on teams, and we're not benefiting from the positives, no matter how small they are, that we are actually delivering. Amidst many other things that still need a lot of work. That's okay. Let's not overlook the good things that we are producing, because there are many good things that we produce. Doesn't matter how small they are. When we're talking about agile and AI environments, this perfectionist mindset really has a huge impact because it undermines the core principles needed for success, like early delivery is delayed by endless refinement, or continuous improvement is stifled by when every iteration has to be perfect. We have a one shot to get this right. That creates a lot of impediment. Adaptability becomes hampered by the fear of change and the fear of making changes, of correcting something that didn't go perfect. So when we have this mindset, we see some typical behaviors that start emerging. Like, for example, when you look at your sprint backlogs or your iteration backlogs, the list of things to do, they never shrink. We're not making any progress. Well, because we're stuck in making sure that things are perfect. No, we want to see a steady, rapid movement through all of those user stories or the tasks that we've created. We also see that when we're looking at the backlog, the ready for implementation, that list of things that are ready for implementation, they just get stuck forever because we're doing endless analysis to make sure that it's perfect, that we've covered every possible edge case. With that, it's a form of procrastination. Why? Because we're trying to make it perfect. Or we engage in retrospectives that focus on what went wrong instead of focusing on the next steps to get us a step forward, to move forward, to get to a better next step. The other thing that we see is that there's a delay in feedback. Feedback is postponed until we have complete demos. The demos that, yes, everybody is just so happy and so proud we got everything perfect. That's a missed opportunity to pivot based on real user input. I've sat through many retrospectives where things weren't perfect. There were definitely a lot of ugly marks in there. And the teams that were presenting were very clear. They were very upfront. They were very honest with the stakeholders. And they said, look, this we're about to show, we still have some issues. The issues are here, or we are aware of this. They were very transparent. They said it the way there was, and they showed it to the stakeholders. I've never sat through one of those meetings where the stakeholders admonished them or criticized them or ridiculed them for having something that wasn't perfect. Instead, yeah, because they recognize that there's a potential impact to how quickly can we finish this, how quickly can we get through those issues. Yes, they might made a comment based on that, which is a reasonable conversation to have. But their main focus was on the positives that they saw. They were on, oh, yes, we can see that we're making progress. These features are looking really good. And it also opened opportunities for them to chime in and say, well, for these areas that you're having challenges, Actually, what we really need is this. And that relieved teams from the pressure that they had, the struggles that they were going through, sometimes vacating entire feature sets that weren't really necessary and important in favor of things that the teams could deliver and they could do a good job with. So there's a lot of opportunity to leverage that early feedback to help focus the team's efforts to what's going to deliver the best value the quickest. Another thing that we see when we engage in perfectionism is accumulating rework when the assumptions prove invalid. Because we've held back and we haven't shared with our stakeholders, we are running on the assumptions that everything that we're doing is absolutely 100% correct. And it's when we show it to the stakeholders and the customers, they see it and they realize, this isn't actually it. We'd rather have this. Oh, there's a lot of rework that needs to be done now. So again, we miss the opportunity to vacate things that are not important and really focus on our efforts on where it makes the most impact, the most difference. So there's a connection to psychological safety challenges like team members fearing raising issues because it's not good enough to share. They become shy, they become scared to put it out there. Having our dirty laundry out there for people to criticize and for people to harpoon on, that's a very vulnerable position that most people won't want to put themselves under. Um, that happens when we expect that everything's going to be perfect. Blame culture becomes amplified when the imperfections emerge publicly. So that blame culture is going to become an impediment to moving faster. When open dialogue is suppressed, innovation stalls. People are not going to take risks. So there's a lot of risk aversion that emerges as a result of it. Ironically, yeah, that's what happens. Perfectionism leads to risk aversion. It leads to less innovation, which makes our products less perfect along the way. So AI amplifies, like everything that AI does, it amplifies the effects of perfectionism. We see it, for example, in infinite prompt iterations. Just one more tweak. I've lived through it myself. I'm certainly not immune to this. I've gone through many times where I found myself just tweaking that prompt because I was so close, and I could see that if I just simply made it a little bit clearer in this one area, then the whole thing would be better. And instead, the way that AI responds is I've seen it time and time again. The more I tweak it, the more I try to make it perfect, the more I start seeing hallucinations and outright flat out errors, incorrect fallacies emerging from the responses from the AI. So in AI, it's very tempting because it's so easy just to type another prompt and get a response. We're spending a lot of time reviewing the information that AI just throws back at us. And let's face it, it's usually very large. It's a very large volume of information. So we have to do a lot of processing, a lot of interpretation of the data that's coming at us. And it's very easy to ask for more. Every time that we do it, we're resetting to restart and recheck it all over again. If instead we focus our improvements on very specific areas and we take the rest that was good enough, we can make a lot more progress faster. That's certainly been my experience and what I've noticed that when I move away from trying to get the whole thing perfect and I take the good enough and then I do improvements on that good enough, I spend a lot less time and I get through things a lot faster than when I try to get the whole of it perfect in one prompt in one go. So there's a real danger of over tweaking. It feels like we have a lot of control. And indeed, because the AI is so responsive and it's giving us the response right away and it's correcting things and it's putting all this effort, there's a sense of control over the process. The reality is that we're just creating the conditions to have more errors, hallucinations, and biases. So there's this illusion that just one prompt will do it. But there's definite diminishing returns. Small tweaks add disproportionate time in the hidden cost of compute time and human review cycles. So there's a real cost implications and opportunity loss when we spend too much time trying to make things perfect, whether it's AI or otherwise. Budget overruns, chasing the marginal quality gains, or delayed deployment, which means missed market opportunities, for example. While we're spending all of our time making it perfect, somebody else may release they're good enough and already be capturing revenue, which we don't have. So there's a real world impact of perfectionism derailing our implementations, AI and otherwise. Scrapping an MVP, for example, after endless model tuning. So instead of leveraging those minimum viable product, the releases that are intended to give us feedback, we scrap it because we're trying to get that perfect model tuned to perfection. After a while, we start losing momentum because our trust is eroded because everything is always incomplete. Well, everything is always going to be incomplete. Let's just accept that and look at the good enough that we have and see if we can use that to get something to our customers right away, even though it's not perfect. And we know it's not perfect. And we're on a good path forward to deliver more value. That we need to learn then when we're always holding back to try to get that perfect thing out, we are holding ourselves back. We need value-based thresholds versus endless optimization. Once we hit that value threshold, it's good enough to move it out there to our customers. So that definition of good enough, which is a value-based completion criteria, is what helps us avoid the perfectionist trap. We need to identify success metrics. How accurate does this need to be? Does it have to be? What is the performance? What is the user satisfaction? Sometimes we may find ourselves with something that is 80% accurate. Performance is okay, it could be better, but the users love it. The users are really happy. If we define our value threshold based on the user satisfaction, we can find ourselves releasing much, much, much earlier. And there's always opportunities to make it better in future iterations. But we need to agree on that minimum viable threshold before each release. If we try to define those as we're doing the implementation, no, we're going to end up in the gold plating and the always trying to make it better. That's natural. We want to do a good job. We want to deliver good, valuable services and products. We need to define that before we start implementation, not while we're in the middle of it. So we need to really separate essential quality that's required from gold plating, from making it unnecessarily better. We want to map features to the customer outcomes versus the nice to haves. What does the customer actually need? What is their must haves versus the stuff that they'd like to have? And this speaks to prioritization. Have good prioritization approaches. There's an approach, the no-type ranking prioritization, or sometimes called forced ranking. Number one priority has to be unique. And so number two, number three, number four, everything that we have in a to-do list needs to have a unique priority number. And that's a tough conversation to have. I understand that. It becomes very difficult, especially if you have stakeholders from multiple groups, organizations, customers. It's really hard to come to an agreement on that. And that's the important conversation to have before we start implementation. Because when we're clear about which is our number one, number two, number three, we know where we have time and priority to spend that extra effort to make sure that it's the best quality possible, where as opposed to where it's not, when that's not necessary. And that comes from our prioritization. If we're clear on the prioritization, we avoid the trap of trying to make everything perfect. We want to create psychological safety where imperfect delivery is acceptable and the conditions under which it's acceptable. And we want to celebrate early demos and partial successes, even if they have a few wrinkles, even if they're not perfect. That's okay, because we're seeing the progress. We're seeing that we're heading in a good direction and we have a good path. We need to emphasize that learning is more important than flawless execution. I know, and I felt it myself, and I feel it, and I can totally relate and understand that it sounds like we're talking about mediocrity. It sounds like we're lowering standards. That's not true. We define where the standards have to be very high because it's necessary and there's a business and customer justification for that. And we differentiate that from where we really want for it to be perfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And this is where leadership can really make a big difference because a leadership approaches that balance excellence and delivery or imbalance it in that black and white way of looking at things. Signals from the top, like ship small and learn fast. That's reinforcing that shipping small, learning fast, doesn't have to be perfect, is better than having these big releases that are perfect. They're going to take a lot longer, and potentially we're going to lose customers as a result of it. There do need to be guardrails. We need to set the maximum refinement time per feature iteration so that we're not overspending time. And we also need to define what the quality threshold has to be for every feature that we're producing. So we do want to encourage teams to take some risks within the safe boundaries. We want for them to understand that it's okay for them to put implementations out there that are not perfect without putting dangerous implementations out in the wild. So again, we do need the boundaries. We do need to define the thresholds and apply the highest standards where they're necessary and relax where they're not necessary. And remember, just because we released it today with some imperfections doesn't mean that we can't make it better tomorrow. If we decide that there's a higher benefit in releasing it today as it is and make it better tomorrow, if necessary, then let's do that. And let's not deprive our customers of the benefit, even if not perfect, but the benefit that they can get from what we're producing today. So to implement this, we want to be thinking about implementing constraint-based exercises. Like, for example, time box design spikes, periods where we are spending time to research. Okay, say for example that you have unknowns that need to be defined. Well, you agree that you're going to spend 60 minutes to prototype and then review. That sets a limit. We're going to explore options to make this better, to improve it for this amount of time. However much we accomplish, great. We didn't, that's okay. We'll defer it to another time. We want to have a perfection budget, if you may. And what I mean by that is assign a set number of hours per iteration for refinement versus new work. So you set a balance that we're going to set, for example, 80% of our time developing new capabilities and 20% of the time improving them, making them better. As long as we work within those budgets, we know we have an opportunity to improve whatever we produce without going overboard, without doing too much of it. So as long as it's functional and it's not completely broken, we don't want to put things out that are completely broken, we can make them incrementally better, up to 20% our budget that we have allocated for those kind of improvements. And when we're talking about retrospectives, we want to have conversations that acknowledge the imperfections that we faced and do so in a way that are helping us understand what we learned from them. So what small imperfection that we encountered taught us the most? When we pose that question to teams, we can really learn a lot, and that can improve our execution in future iterations. We can also take a retrospective and look at our stories that we've implemented, and we can look at them from a delivery speed versus the polish time. Discuss the trade-offs. You know, how long did it take us to deliver this relative to the amount of polishing that we invested in it? And what was the trade-off of doing that? Take a look at your own data, the data that's available from the work that you're doing. We want to value effort. And recognize that every time that we deliver something of value, even if it's not perfect, it's a reason to celebrate. The good enough tells us that we have delivered something that has improved our customers' operation, their ability to solve the challenges that they have. So we see that whatever we implemented got us 80% there. What do we gain from another 20%? What do our customers gain from 20%? Ask your customers. Ask them if the 20% would really deliver that much more, or if that 80% that we delivered was just perfect. It was good enough. And when given the choice of working on something new or making better what we have, see what they say. Sometimes they may say, yes, we want this to be better and improved. Okay, then that's a priority. And most times I have my experience has been that they usually will be happy with the good enough and ask for more features, more capabilities, so that they have greater benefit from the products and services that we're producing. So have a budget. Acknowledge that, yes, it is natural, it's human, perfectly understandable to want to make the things that we're producing the highest quality possible. Everybody wants to feel proud about what they're producing. And if all that we're communicating is, oh, we just need to get by, yeah, that's going to lead to mediocrity, and we don't want to do that. So balance it. Balance it by setting an explicit budget and say that we're going to agree to spend this much amount of time in producing new capabilities and this much of time in improving the work that we're doing, whether it's the work that we just completed or something that we did before. And when we have that ability to categorize, prioritize, and allocate our time in a way that balances new capabilities and enhancements, everybody can feel that they have an opportunity to always improve, to always make things better, and to continue delivering good quality services, capabilities to our customers. So there's a lot to navigate through. Understand that perfectionism on its own is probably going to consume more time, energy, and efforts that is necessary. Is going to diminish there's diminishing returns on that investment, and it's probably going to delay things unnecessarily. So if we want to deliver products and services as early as possible to customers, let's taper. Let's keep a good check on our efforts to make things always better. We do want to make things better. Kaizen, I've talked about it before. It's a culture of continuous improvement. So yes, we want to continuously improve, and we want to do it in a measured way that doesn't get in the way of delivering things as quickly as possible. So with that, if you'd like to learn more about Kaizen and the culture of continuous improvement, click one of these. I'll be happy to tell you all about it.